Welcome to the next lecture of American Government 1. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Baggs, and our topic this week is Texas parties. Historically, Texas has largely been a one party state. Democrats dominated the state politics for more than 100 years, and then the Republicans assumed control for the last 30. The Republican Party in Texas is divided, though, into two factions: the business oriented mainstream Republicans and the Tea Party conservatives. In the two most recent legislative sessions, the clash between factions of the Republican Party was readily apparent. Governor Greg Abbott began his career as a mainstream Republican, but arguably has moved to the right to avoid the fate of Dewhurst and other Republicans who were defeated in primaries by more conservative firebrands. Divisions within the Democratic Party, like the socialist versus the centrist slash moderates, are not as consequential because they do not control the government. And the Democrats currently face an uphill battle trying to regain power, especially in statewide races. Role and structure. The main purpose of political parties in Texas is to help their candidates win elections and to assist voters in making their choices. In other words, parties provide a label under which candidates run and with which voters can identify. Voters often use the party label as a cue to the ideology of the candidates. Parties help raise money for campaigns, help get out the vote, and organize the government if they win a majority in the election. Each party develops a party platform, which is a statement of principles and political philosophy that the party promises to enact if elected to office. This helps voters get a better sense of what the party stands for, and this is especially important in Texas because of the large numbers of candidates on the ballot. Party affiliation of office holders also enables voters to hold the party accountable for its policies or its failures. Texas party politics. States differ in the strength of the two political parties, and when compared to the national party, they often have less power. The strength of parties in Texas has waned recently, chiefly because the competition between the two parties is lacking. Without a competitive other party, there is no need for a strong party organization to oppose it. Texas party politics has been less polarized at times than national politics, mainly because, as Tip O'Neill once stated, all politics is local. What does that mean? Well, local issues such as school bonds, water issues, etc., are usually not ideological in nature, meaning that these issues at the local level are not clearly defined as partisan issues. However, partisan polarization is becoming more pronounced in the Texas legislature. Partisan polarization is the degree to which Republicans have become more conservative and Democrats have become more liberal. Compromise has become increasingly difficult. Partisan polarization has become more pronounced nationwide, so Texas's increasing polarization is not abnormal in comparison to the rest of the country. Texas political socialization. Political socialization is the introduction of individuals into the political culture, that is, the learning of their underlying beliefs and values on which their political ideology is based. Political socialization occurs in our early years, and the main agents of socialization are our parents, religious leaders, teachers, and others. We are also profoundly influenced by our geographical environment. For many people, partisan affiliation is important when deciding how to vote. Partisanship has increasingly become correlated with ideology. What does that mean? Well, once upon a time, there were conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans. This is no longer the case, as most Democrats now identify as liberal and Republicans as conservative. However, there are an increasing number of Texans identifying as independent, and they are sometimes called swing voters as they may ultimately decide elections. The contemporary Republican Party in Texas. The contemporary Republican Party in Texas is a dominant political force with significant influence at both the state and national levels. Since the 1990s, the Republican Party has held a majority in statewide offices in Texas. The GOP controls the Texas legislature, the governor's office, and most other statewide elected positions. Texas has consistently voted Republican in presidential elections since 1980. The Texas GOP is largely conservative, with strong support for limited government, low taxes, gun rights, the Second Amendment, pro life policies, and border security and strict immigration enforcement. The party also often supports states' rights and opposes what it sees as federal overreach. While united in many policy goals, the party includes different factions. There is the establishment Republicans who focus on pro business policies, infrastructure, and economic growth. And then there is the so called Tea Party, or grassroots conservatives, who emphasize ideological purity, limited government, and often challenge moderate Republicans in primaries. The challenges that Republicans face in the state include demographic shifts and the increasing ethnic diversity that may challenge Republican dominance in the long term. The reason for the so called Tea Party moniker is because it's not entirely clear that there is such a division within the Republican Party in Texas. Research has shown that Tea Party identifiers are not significantly different demographically than Texas Republicans as a whole. In surveys, roughly 86% of respondents who identified as Tea Party Republicans also identify as conservative. This is almost no different than the rest of Republicans in Texas. As Texas grows, the urban versus rural divide will become more pronounced. Republicans dominate the rural areas, while Democrats perform better in urban centers like Austin, Houston, and Dallas. The contemporary Democratic Party in Texas. Texas Democrats have been consigned to minority status since the early 2000s. And no Democrat has won Texas in a presidential race since Jimmy Carter in 1976. Texas Democrats have influence in certain localities, such as in Austin, Houston, and San Antonio, but this influence does not extend to statewide elections. The growth of the minority population in Texas may or may not lead to changes in the party's respective strengths. The party's base is made up of African Americans, Hispanics, and white liberals from urban areas, but this base is currently not large enough to win statewide races. Party organization. It's easy to find articles where pundits opine about registered Republicans in Texas or registered Democrats in Texas. There is no such thing as a registered Republican or a registered Democrat in this state because Texas does not have party registration. Parties in Texas are organized at the precinct, county, and state levels, specifically to conduct the party primary. The precinct is the most basic level of political organization at the local level. In each election precinct, a precinct chair is elected in the party primary, and they run the precinct convention and serve on the county executive committee. Also elected in the primary is the county chair, who heads the county executive committee. The county executive committee is responsible for running the county's primary elections and planning county conventions. At the state level, the party's ultimate authority is the executive committee that includes a state chair and a vice chair. The state chair and vice chair are the top two state level leaders in the party, and they are selected every 2 years at the state party conventions. The state executive committee is responsible for governing a party's activities throughout the state. They accept filings by candidates for statewide office, help raise funds for the party, and help establish party policy. Precinct conventions send delegates to the county convention and may submit resolutions for the party platform. The county conventions, or in urban areas, district conventions, then elect delegates to the state convention. Third parties in Texas. The two parties in power make it difficult for third parties to thrive, and third party candidates rarely win. Third parties and candidates do, however, emerge in Texas. There were the Grange and populist movements, the State Rights Party, or Dixiecrats, who were conservative Democrats who abandoned the National Democratic Party in the 1948 presidential election, and there was George Wallace's third party candidacy for president to defend segregation. La Raza Unida formed a political party in Texas in order to bring attention to the concerns of Mexican Americans. Due to some nonpartisan elections, the La Raza Unida party has been able to gain control of some city councils, school boards, and mayor's offices. And then there's the Libertarian and Green parties of Texas. Third parties can impact elections even if they do not win. The most recent significant threat to major party dominance of Texas politics came in the 2006 election for governor. Rick Perry was seen as a vulnerable incumbent, especially during a year that was not particularly favorable for Republicans. Chris Bell, a former Houston member of Congress, won the Democratic nomination. There was also two independent candidates on the ballot, former Comptroller Carol Keaton Strayhorn and musician and humorist Kinky Friedman, whose slogan was "Why the Hell Not?" When all the ballots were counted, the results were not surprising. Rick Perry won 39% of the vote, Chris Bell got 29%, Kinky Friedman got 12, and Carol Strayhorn got 18%. Rick Perry won by 10 percentage points, but the two independent candidates took votes from him, especially Strayhorn, who was a Republican running as an independent. Why do third parties never win? Together, Republicans and Democrats have made the rules on what it takes for third party candidates to get on the ballot, and they've made ballot access exceedingly difficult. The two parties don't want independents running because it would offer voters other choices and hurt their election efforts. Democrats may have trouble getting traction in Texas, but third parties with no or limited infrastructure are even more disadvantaged. Even when third parties get on the ballot, they rarely win. So why don't people vote for third parties? Texas has a plurality election rules and single member districts. Therefore, a vote for a third party candidate is seen as a wasted vote for someone who has no chance to win. Texas history is a one party state. After the Civil War, Texas entered into an era of one party democratic rule that lasted for well over a century. The only meaningful or competitive election was the Democratic primary. Republicans frequently did not run any candidates at all for many offices, and many counties had no Republican Party at all. However, by about the mid 1940s, a split occurred between liberal and conservative Democrats that developed in response to New Deal and civil rights policies. The Shivercraft movement. Although Democrats dominated Texas politics for decades, presidential republicanism grew when the Shivercraft movement emerged. Presidential republicanism was a voting pattern in which conservatives vote Democrat for state offices but Republican for presidential candidates. The Shivercrat movement was led by Texas Governor Allen Shivers during the 1950s, when conservative Democrats in Texas supported Republican candidate Dwight Eisenhower for president. Many conservative Democrats in Texas believed that National Democratic Party had become too liberal. Conservative Democrats. Since the end of the Civil War, most Democrats were conservative on fiscal and racial issues. Conservative Democrats, also known as Blue Dog Democrats, were usually opposed to abortion, supported the status quo in civil rights, and were supportive of gun rights. Many Southern Democrats were elected to Congress and gained seniority in the Democratic controlled Congress. In the contest between conservative Democrats and liberal Democrats, the conservatives usually won because they were more conservatives than liberals in Texas. Some notable liberal Democrats who did emerge from the state were the U.S. Senator Ralph Yarborough, and President Lyndon B. Johnson. However, the New Deal economic policies and civil rights measures divided the party, and liberals and conservatives battled in Democratic primaries. By the late 1970s, the winner of the Democratic primary had to face a significant conservative challenge from a Republican in the general election. Because Republicans were able to run as more conservative than the Democrats, they started becoming an endangered species in the South. Many conservative Democrats had become marginalized in the National Party because of their social conservatism. Some of the biggest losses conservative Democrats experienced in Texas occurred following the 2003 redistricting cycle. By 2012, all conservative Democrats from Texas in Congress had retired, switched parties, or lost their re elections. Growth of the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan's election as president in 1980 marked a significant change in how Texas began to vote in both presidential and state elections. In 1999, every statewide elected official was Republican. In 2025, both U.S. senators and 25 of the 38 House members from Texas were Republican. Party unity and disunity. All groups have opposing factions within them, and the two parties in Texas are no exception. When the Democratic Party was the dominant party in Texas, factional battles were common between liberals and conservatives. Today, the Republican Party in Texas has its factions vying for control. There is the traditional or business oriented wing Republican versus the MAGA Republicans who are aligned with President Trump's Make America Great Again movement. While most Texas Republicans are conservative, there are further distinctions within the party, or conservative versus very conservative, or the far right, with some groups pushing for even more stringent policies on social and cultural issues. Influences on partisanship. Rural versus urban remains a major divide because cities in Texas have become more democratic while rural areas have remained solidly conservative Republican. Voters tend to settle in places with like minded people, reinforcing the political proclivities already established. The Democratic Party appears to be reemerging in parts of Texas, especially around major cities. For example, as Dallas County, traditionally Republican, became denser and the suburbs expanded to adjoining counties, Dallas transformed into a solidly Democratic county. The future for political parties in Texas. While it is always foolhardy to try to predict the future, some key observations are worth watching. Conflicts within the Republican Party could provide Democrats an opportunity to capitalize on what voters might perceive as dysfunction and extreme policies. If more far right Republicans are elected to statewide office and move further and further to the right, a centrist Democrat could possibly win a statewide race. Demographic changes are also likely to benefit the Democratic Party. Texas is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse and is now a majority minority state. In addition, there has been a major influx of white residents from other states who were attracted by jobs, low taxes, and low property values. Beto O'Rourke's strong performance in 2018 might be an indication that Texas is becoming more competitive for Democrats. However, the Democrats have had to make appeals to Texans by adopting more mainstream, moderate policies. The end.